So I'm gonna let everyone in. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just gonna kind of take a couple minutes as everyone starts to trickle in here. But thanks for joining. Very excited to start this meeting off in a few minutes. In the meantime, feel free to start introducing yourselves in the chat. So you obviously don't have to, but if you're interested in connecting with other people or just having your name out there, feel free to introduce yourself, maybe say the traditional lands that you're from, your pronouns, and maybe any organizations you're associated with as well. So feel free, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, to do so now while we just wait for other people to trickle in and join in for this call. We'll get probably more properly started 5 past or so, give or take, depending on how the flow of trickling in people seems to be. It's pretty steady still right now. Also, just so you know, you might have gotten this notification as you entered, as that sometimes happens with Zoom, but this meeting will be recorded, or is currently being recorded. So if you're not comfortable with your face in that recording, then feel free to turn your camera off. Wonderful. Okay. Last few people kind of trickling in, and but I'll kind of start to get moving, as I'm sure we're all anxious and interested to get started and hear from our wonderful speakers today and get into the bulk of this meeting and kind of get to the root of these issues of the intergenerational climate organizing, which we're all here to discuss today. So I will introduce myself to begin with as your kind of moderator for this meeting. And so my name is Hope. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Community Climate Hub's manager with the Climate Reality Project Canada. And I'm joining you here today from Jabuktuk in Mi'kma'ki. So it is the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Mi'kmaq people. So we're here on the East Coast. It's also known as Halifax. I also encourage you to all take this moment now, as I do my own personal land acknowledgement, to reflect and acknowledge the traditional stewards of the lands that you may occupy across Turtle Island, especially as we're gathering here today to attempt to bridge the gaps between generations in hopes to build a better future for all. We really must be recognizing the work that has already been done and continues to be done by Indigenous peoples of these lands for us to all be here today even. So feel free to take a bit of a moment. I know that a lot of you are kind of giving thanks and acknowledging that in your chat introductions. So that's great if you're just joining now. Again, I welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat by giving your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and maybe any organizations you might be affiliated with. I am joined here today by two wonderful people. So I'll give the mic to Elizabeth first.
Hi, everyone. Great to see some familiar faces and lots of new ones as well. And really happy to be working with Hope and Sarah on this. So I'm Elizabeth. I'm from Future Ground Network, which is a project of the David Suzuki Foundation. And we'll tell you a bit more about that if you're interested. I'm joining today from the traditional land and territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, Mississaugas of Credit, and Métis people. So that is Dish with One Spoon territory and Treaty 13 territory. And I'm a white settler here of Scottish, Irish, and English descent. And you will hear from me again in a bit. Over to Sarah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am a coordinator with the Climate Justice Organizing Hub and who has helped co-host this event tonight. And so I'm actually coming to you from Montreal, also known as, or Tiohtià:ke, also known as Montreal. So excited to be here. I'll pass it back to Hope.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, you two. So we're actually going to get this meeting started off with a fun interactive poll. So we're here to talk about intergenerational organizing, and it's really nice to kind of get a sense of who is all here then across the generations. So if Sarah, do you want to start off that poll? It'll prompt you right now to answer a couple questions, and then we will also share those answers as soon as everyone or most people have voted, and then you can kind of get a sense of where everyone's at with intergenerational organizing and all that does. And if anyone is having poll difficulties, I'll just say orally that the question being asked is, what experience, past or present, do you have with organizing in youth spaces? And the options are a lot, some, and none yet. So, you know, if you're having poll issues, you can always answer in the chat.
I'll also say that if you have any technical issues tonight, I'll be your point person. So feel free to message me if at any point you need some support.
Okay. Seems like almost all of you has answered. We'll wait another couple seconds and then we'll post this. Okay, so as we can see, we've got a good, nice, even distribution, actually, a nice normal distribution at least. So we've got around 20% of you have a lot of experience organizing youth spaces. Most of you are kind of in the middle, and then almost a little bit of over a quarter, but about a third actually of you haven't had any experience. So we're excited to kind of address that tonight. So I'm gonna pass it along to Elizabeth now, who's gonna introduce our speakers for you today.
Thank you, Hope. And thanks everyone for being here. So I'm going to introduce our speakers one by one. I'm going to introduce each one and pose them the first question, which is the same, a bit of a framing question. And then what I'll do is ask a second question and open it up to whoever wants to weigh in. And then if there's time left in this section, we could get into a bit of back and forth discussion. I have some thoughts, but we definitely want to make time at the end for you all as participants to ask our panelists questions after the breakout rooms. So we'll start off with Roxy. Roxy Cohen is an educator and PhD candidate who's been working intergenerationally toward climate justice for 10 years. And she's a co-founder of Rooted and Rising, which is a certificate program at York University in holistic climate leadership. And that's led by an intergenerational team. Roxy co-created Conscious Minds Camp, which is a youth-led summer camp that emphasized intergenerational community and continues to support the St. Jamestown Community Co-op, Roxy does, in food sovereignty work and participatory education. So Roxy, could you tell us a bit about your theory of change, how you see change happening, and how you're approaching organizing in that regard?
Sure, great, thank you. Thank you for that introduction as well. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I thought I was last on the list, but I'm first, so here we go. It works. So hi everyone, my name is Roxy. I am calling in from Takaranto, also called Toronto. It's the traditional territory of Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Mississauga the first of the credit, and Métis, so dish with one spoon wampum. And I'm Jewish heritage and descent. My maternal grandmother came from England and lived on the traditional territory of Seminole and Kaluja, followed by Haudenosaunee. And my maternal grandmother was born and raised on Nikaskanan and Abenaki territory in Quebec. So I have some kind of recent heritage here, but Eastern European before that in England. And yeah, so the question again, I always get lost in the introduction, is on theory of change and my approach to organizing. I mean, I think, it's interesting even to frame myself here in an intergenerational conversation for a moment, because I think, to ground ourselves in who are we, I'm an adult, becoming an adult, recently a youth. I've been a youth and a youth organizer for, all of my climate change work, but I'm 30 now. So the feds tell me I'm an adult. I feel it. Still got that youth lens as well. But I'm clumsy with my language, and I just wanted to name that outright. I sometimes talk about myself as a youth, sometimes as an adult. I'm in the transition space, and I think it also speaks to how messy these categories are that we try and kind of shift into binaries. And I approach change as an educator. I found myself in education through, my desire to make positive change, starting looking at climate change and very quickly realizing as a young person that meant changing everything about how we live and how we orient to nature and to one another. And that this is really a kind of whole systems, whole self change. And I found myself, asking at a young age, how do you start a revolution? What does that look like? And I think that that's been my theory of change since 18, kind of bringing myself through different social movements, different organizing spaces, and learning by experimenting that, the juiciest spaces of transformation for me were really in those education spaces, kind of on the fringes, on the edges of kind of formal organizing and protesting work. Because I found that people, when we come into learning spaces, into a class, whether it's kind of in the park together on the protest line or in schools, we're coming to learn, we're coming to listen, to accept mistakes, to learn from others, to connect from those that are really different than us. And that's where I really found myself gravitating. I was just organizing, period. And then after a time, being a part of one initiative that we'll get to it, but it did fall apart due to intergenerational, interpersonal conflict that went on. And I found myself saying, oh, I'm just sick of adults and all their baggage. Maybe I'll just make a youth space, and started doing that with some co-creators and finding that that's a lot of where the grants and the language of money within activism is oriented to as well. And that's interesting. And I really found myself co-creating spaces. First, as Elizabeth introduced me, a Conscious Minds Camp, which really was a space to kind of separate from that protest space, inspired a lot by my experiences in the Occupy movement. Those of you that are maybe older on the call will remember when I tell that to young people, they're like, what? What's that? Occupy? But this kind of sense of really just coming together and practicing the world that we want to live in. We say we want to be cooperative. We say we want to live in this liberated, free, equitable world that knows how to flourish in collaboration with nature. But yet we've all been trained to various degrees. I've been very well trained by schools, by capitalist colonial systems and media to live as a very isolated, selfish accumulator. So as much as I and others, we wanted to live different, like it takes practice. It takes learning by trying and erroring and learning through some conflict together. And I really found the importance of having some carved out spaces next to the more kind of on the ground frontline organizing spaces where we can slow down, reconnect with ourselves and with each other and really kind of shift into that imagining the world that we want. If climate change is what we don't want, what do we want? And how do we begin to practice that together here? And I've kind of found that within very intergenerational spaces. And as I'm shifting into adulthood, finding myself being more and more drawn to the language of intergenerational. And maybe I'll just pause it there.
Thank you so much, Roxy.
You didn't say much, hon.
That's beautiful.
I didn't say too much, I'll have to catch it. Tell me more.
All right, so we'll now move to Sunny. Sunny Enkin-Lewis is a student, university student involved in climate justice organizing. And Sunny started her journey in Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg and has continued organizing in the Lekwungen-speaking territories in Victoria. She has experience in both youth-focused and intergenerational climate justice communities. So Sunny, tell us a bit about how you see change happening and how you approach that through your organizing.
Thank you so much for welcoming me into this conversation. I really like this question, and it came to me is posed to me now in a really interesting time in my life where I've been struggling a lot with how I see change happening. There have been times where I could see change happening through specific strategies. During my time in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory, organizing with wonderful youth-focused and intergenerational groups, a lot of my focus was on putting pressure on the government and mobilizing as many people as possible. And I saw change happen through this strategy. I watched as we pushed climate to the forefront of issues during 2019, and governments and communities started talking more about climate change as businesses closed their doors, schools brought their whole populations, and religious organizations mobilized their communities as the people of Manitoba showed up on the September 27th strike. I also saw change through nonviolent disobedience led by Indigenous land defenders, especially during solidarity actions with the Wet'suwet'en Nation. I watched change happen through education as I taught kids as young as 8 about climate change and helped guide them to take real action in their community, including through a craft sale fundraiser. And now I'm watching change happen in Victoria through community building as we host socials to provide a space for climate-focused community members to come together, connect, and form relationships. I have seen change happen through a variety of tactics, and I deeply recognize that it's nowhere near enough. I have to recognize that I don't know how change will happen, but I think it will happen through a variety of tactics and strategies. I believe that change will happen through each of us discovering how we can commit our passions and talents to the movement for a better world. I think everyone has a role in the climate justice movement, and some of my proudest moments are when I can convince someone that their seemingly unrelated gifts can be used to further the cause. We are stronger when we push to change collectively, but that does not mean that we have to do it by all doing the same thing. Collective action has so many benefits, and one of those for me is that it's really a place where it can foster hope. And this is part of my theory of change because I believe that hope is at the core of what will drive change. Despair is such a valid and understandable response to climate change, and I do not believe that everyone needs to think the way I think. But for me personally, hope really breeds action. When we can envision a better world, we can enact it. And I've received reactions to this perspective that place hope in the same position as naivety. But for me, hope is active and purposeful. It radicalizes me, it gives me strength, and it's truly the only way for me to participate in this work. I'm inspired to have hope by looking at the multitude of ways people are making change, and with climate justice, I think it's important to recognize and be inspired by Indigenous people leading this movement. Learning from elders and knowledge keepers has been really fundamental to all of my organizing, and prioritizing Indigenous voices is not only necessary given the reality of whose land we're living on, but also aligns with my values, with the values within climate justice. Indigenous people are the most impacted by climate change, but have also been living sustainably on this land for generations and generations. While again, I don't know exactly how change will happen, I personally know it will happen. And I believe that it will include forefronting Indigenous voices, it will include collective action, it'll center hope, and it'll include a variety of tactics and strategies where everyone is taking on their own role in the movement.
Thank you so much, Sunny. That was really inspiring. We're lucky to hear from you tonight. And I will pass it over to Judy. So Judy Feinstein has dedicated many years to youth engagement and climate leadership. In 2008, she founded a nonprofit organization, Yes BC, Youth for Environmental Stewardship, to empower young people as environmental leaders. And since 2009, Judy has been Climate Reality's lead mentor in BC, providing mentorship to hundreds of climate leaders. Recently retired from her work with the Legislative Assembly of BC, she's devoting some more time to working as a mentor and an ally to young people who she believes are leading us all to a sustainable future. So Judy, could you tell us a bit about how you see change and how you approach that? Oh, you're on.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for welcoming me to this space. It's really a pleasure to be here and glad to see so many people on this call, on this webinar from across Canada. So I did come into working in this space of intergenerational collaboration and bridge building really around 2006. And what had happened was I'd had a bit of an awakening about climate change and realized that I needed to learn as much as I possibly could about climate change and how serious it was. And in doing so, I discovered that the most important thing that I could do would be to engage young people. And that over the next couple of years is what led me to starting a nonprofit organization, Yes BC, which still is in existence, and we have a new initiative called Bridging Generations. So I'm very tuned in to this whole notion, and I think what really led me to continue the work that I've done has been how inspired I've been by the young people I've had the privilege to get to know and to work with. And everything that Yes BC has done, and we're a small organization, completely volunteer run, but the inspiration that's come from providing a platform for young people to raise their voices. And also every initiative in this organization has been co-created and co-developed with young people. So that's always been the approach. And I believe that we are in the middle of change. Change is happening. And that doesn't mean that we're moving fast enough towards the change that needs to happen, but I do believe we are in the middle of it. So what really keeps me going is the inspiration that I receive from the young people that I work with. And I wanted to make note of young people and their involvement in politics. And voter turnout of young people has been typically very low in Canada, in the US, and that really needs to change. We really need a lot more young people involved in politics and bringing their ideas to the table. So what is, I think, noteworthy, recently the US midterm elections had the second highest turnout in 30 years of the youth vote. And Canada's voter turnout for youth is increasing, but it's still quite low. If young people voted en masse, we would change everything. Sorry, you would change everything. So I think part of what I feel motivated to do is to try encourage young people to get involved in the political space and realize their actual power. And there is a lot of power, and politicians need young people. It was mentioned there, I retired recently from Legislative Assembly, so I worked for an elected member of the legislature. And one of the ways to make change, I was campaign manager to get the first Green elected in the BC legislature. And one of the things we did from the very beginning was include young people in the campaign and put them in positions of responsibility and help them develop and get engaged in politics so they would want to keep doing that. So yeah, so that's been a big part of the work that I've done, and I'm very happily retired from being a political staffer, and now I have time to really devote to this work. And I mentioned Bridging Generations, and that's our initiative. And what we're really trying to do is find ways that young people, all generations, can connect, can work together, can support each other, be each other's champions. And yeah, I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Judy. And yes, we're super lucky to hear from you and the experience that you have, in particular that you've been working to bridge that gap for so long. And so I have a second question for all of you that you can weigh in on really in any order that you want. So I'll let people speak up. And then if you just want to say a little bit and then pass it over to someone else, we can go back and forth a little bit in the next 12 minutes before getting into breakouts. And just for anyone tuning in now, you will have a chance to ask questions of the panelists after we go into a breakout discussion. So as they're speaking, think about if there's anything that you would like to circle back to or hear more about after. So the question is, in your experience, how can interpersonal or structural issues between generations get in the way of that organizing process that you're talking about, that theory of change that you hold?
I'll jump in and talk about an example with structural issues. I think that many of the issues are part of historically. For example, the structure of political parties has not included youth in a meaningful way. So an example that I wanted to offer was I was a mentor and advisor to the Young BC Greens, and they wondered what's our agency? What do we really have any say in? And so we set upon getting them a seat on the provincial council with a vote. And the first thing that happened was there was a leadership contest in the BC Greens, and the Young BC Greens hosted a debate, and the first question they asked was, would you be in favor of a voting seat for a Young BC Green on the provincial council? To which, of course, they all said yes. And then it was, proceeding through the structure to get this, and it happened. This took about a year to happen, but it's an example of how change is taking place.
I can speak to some of the more interpersonal sides of things. I want to start off by saying I've had such positive experiences in intergenerational organizing spaces, and overwhelmingly positive experiences, but there have definitely been issues that I think come up with any organizing and are just intensified by intergenerational or generational gaps, I guess. I think one thing that I've noticed is that some people really think they have the exact formula to change, and their way is the right way, and they know how it's going to happen, and if we just listen to them, then we can make change happen. And as I talked about, I think a variety of tactics are really important, and a variety of strategies are really important. So it sometimes feels like that can close the door to openness, to creativity, and to new ways of making change. And I've noticed that especially in intergenerational organizing spaces, though definitely not exclusively. I think another intergenerational issue that can come up is just not having enough respect or taking each other seriously enough. And I've seen this on both sides, both being the older youth within youth spaces, and being the youth within more intergenerational spaces. I think there's a lot of prejudices that we hold for people from different ages, age groups, generations. And for people around my age, I think we sometimes think that people who are younger than us have not enough knowledge or skills to do organizing, and people older than us are sometimes too set in their ways, or not enough drive or something. So there's definitely prejudices that we hold within different age groups. And I've also experienced the other side of it, of people kind of belittling me or just not having high expectations of me based on my age. And so I definitely don't think I'm free from those prejudices, but I do strive to recognize that anyone from any age group can help be part of the movement, and those differences in perspectives actually really contribute towards making change. And with that belittling or struggle to be taken seriously, I did want to note that it's so intensified by other aspects of identity. So it's not just age as an isolated factor. Race and class and gender and all aspects of our identity also play into that fight to be taken seriously. But I do think age is a really important component of that. And yeah, those are some of the issues I would see.
Yeah, I'll jump in here as well. I really want to affirm what both of you just shared, especially, I'm thinking a lot around the prejudices that we hold, and even these ideas of, what different ages are supposed to be. And even noting that this is a very, very much rooted within quite white, North American conceptions. When we say, oh, millennials, they're all like this, that's a very class, a very specific location that we're talking about. And I know I'm calling from Toronto. I know many of you are calling from places that are highly diverse, with folks kind of settling here from all over, and recognizing that even an age experience is not the same for all of us. And it really kind of changes based on where we've been living in our experiences. Some of us are forced to grow up much younger than others of us. So recognizing that is kind of, breaking those pieces. And it's so interesting, you know, I'm similar to you, Sunny, you know, I can name, and Judy, name so many times of like really beautiful intergenerational work. And I totally see the side of kind of needing to name these generations to notice our different gifts and what we have to put on the table together. You know, I've learned a lot about what it means to be in healthy intergenerational spaces, from learning about Indigenous traditions and learning from my Indigenous teachers in my life. And, you know, thinking about within Anishinaabeg stories of youth, or within the Ojibwe sacred circle and medicine wheel of the 4 directions, you know, youth are really here for a critical purpose, to carry those gifts of creativity and energy and to bridge the old ways with the new, and to say, that's really not working and I'm here to disrupt it, you know, and to bring that kind of really important knowledge to the community, often through experiences or spiritual attentiveness, and kind of going through that process of finding our path. And yet I know for myself as a young person, sometimes it felt just like so much weight on my shoulders, this idea of like being the leader, and like youth have to take charge because other generations have messed up. And now we have to come in and, you know, clean it up, fix it up. And sometimes it was like, but I don't even know who I am yet, right? Like, who am I? What are my experiences? Who are my teachers? Who can I trust? What's my identity? Young people are going through all of that as well. So recognizing, I think, you know, when we get into this language of like youth are our leaders, knowing that this is true in terms of vision, imagination, optimism, all many different things, but that young people like also need to be held in their feelings. You know, we have a lot of like grief and loss and anxiety to process, and we need support. You know, young people still need to be like slapped on the back sometimes lovingly when we're, you know, being a bit foolish. I know there's been many times in my organizing spaces where an elder has to come up and say, you know, what are you holding on to, that jealousy and resentment? You're messing up our spaces. Like, sit down and talk to each other, young people, which we wouldn't have done without that elder support. So, you know, it is really key to learn about how things have done, to even learn the experience of past movements and waves of this emergence of change that we're all bringing forward. And yet, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to take up too much space, but I want to share, and yet, you know, I think age is also just another binary that like is there, and politically and within our language separates us. And just like all the other binaries that we're fighting to change, you know, also holds this side to it where it is very isolating, like, especially because so many of us have not grown up within families and traditions that demonstrate healthy intergenerational collaboration and work. You know, giving ourselves that space, but really noticing that at the kind of macro level politically, youth movements are often used kind of discursively to stand in for racialized and otherwise oppressed groups that are fighting for liberation, right? So a liberatory movement becomes a youth movement, right? When the movements happened across the Arab world in 2011, 2012, toppling governments in Egypt, Libya, Yemen, the global media called it a youth movement. And that serves, you know, to do a couple things. It legitimizes folks, foreign militaries coming in because they're just youth. They don't know what they're doing. We need some adults to handle this situation. And it serves to kind of marginalize the movement as a whole, right? That idea of like, oh, youth are just rebellious, they'll learn, they'll figure it out as they grow up. We don't have to actually focus on that. And I worry about that sometimes in climate justice organizing work. And this kind of stifling to the side of youth. And I see it, and I'm so sorry I'm going on. I'm just going to share one really quick story that maybe me and Sunny can reply to close us here. But you know, tangibly, I was working with a city department, I won't name the city, and it was their sustainability office. And I was talking to 2 people. One was their outreach person out there in the community doing stuff. One was on the grounds guy working with people who own buildings to like actually put in net zero, you know, heating systems, cooling systems, the technical specifics. Guy who works in buildings says to outreach person, wow, you're doing so much youth work. I would love to get connected. Person in outreach in the city says, oh, our work moves so fast, we can't connect you in, right? And in that moment, I noticed this kind of macro neoliberal story happening on the ground where youth were being really engaged. The outreach person was doing a lot. They were doing events, they were doing talks and gatherings and like learning sessions. but it all kind of felt like busy work if they weren't going to be connected to the people on the ground doing the real change work that were yearning to collaborate with them. And I see that separation happening a lot of like youth to outreach, engage the youth, but not really in the depth of the work and bringing them in. And that's a kind of structural and interpersonal kind of blend of issues that I've been noticing lately. I don't know, Sunny or Judy, if you've experienced similar, saw some nodding heads.
Yes, definitely. And I think what is really important and incumbent upon my generation is to ensure that we do center young people and young voices in important conversations. And often people in my generation are where we have more conventional ideas, whereas young people aren't afraid to try new things, to challenge the status quo. And you bring so much energy and ideas, and older people like me do bring experience, and sometimes we can bring access, right? Sometimes we can help young people access these towers of power. So yeah.
And Sunny, is anything bubbling up for you?
Yeah, just to echo some of what Roxy and also Judy were saying, I really like, Roxy, what you said about how age is just another way to separate us. And I think that's something I think about a lot. Like, I do think we can recognize specific gifts that each generation can bring, but also recognizing that it's so fluid, and age doesn't necessarily define experience or knowledge. Everyone brings something different, and age is just one piece of our positionality and our perspective. And then also, yeah, really relating to the narrative around youth being the leaders is sometimes, it's really inspiring, and it's also sometimes really disheartening, because all I want sometimes is for everyone to step up, and not just, like, I've had conversations with people where they kind of laugh it off because it's our problem now, and like we gotta handle it. And that's really hard, because it should be everyone involved, or everyone who can be involved. And yeah, we don't, I think, like, we saw a lot of youth stepping up partially because we saw that it was necessary. But yeah, I don't think I think youth are part of who's leading the movement, but I don't think it's exclusively youth at all. Yeah, I think intergenerational is so important.
Thank you so much. There's been so much richness shared by all of you, so I really, really appreciate it, and I know everyone does. We've had a lot of thoughts coming up in the chat. So I won't try to summarize everything right now. I hope that we will have lots of time to get back to you, our panelists, and hear some questions from our participants today. So I'll pass it back to Hope now to frame up the breakout rooms.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And thanks to all the panelists as well. So Elizabeth has just posted again in the chat a little briefer of the agenda. So we've just gone over the discussion, but we're about to kind of head into our next activity now, which is a breakout room activity. And so now, with all of these amazing thoughts that have been given to us by our lovely panelists, we're going to ask you to do some more reflecting together in small breakout room groups. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna prompt the breakout rooms to open, and then there's gonna be a label for the breakout room. So there's gonna be breakout rooms designated for just youth, and then those dedicated just to non-youth. So depending on how you identify, choose one that works for you. We also recommend that we kind of keep each breakout room to about 4 to 5 people, just because that's what we found works best for kind of interpersonal discussions. If it's too many people, sometimes, thoughts can kind of get hidden, or people won't have enough time to speak to one another. So if you can see, usually when you open up those breakout rooms, you'll see however many people are already in there. So you can kind of just join the ones that are already a bit emptier. And then we're also going to be posting the link to the Jamboards. So these discussions are going to focus around 3 main questions. And so we'll post that in the chat, but they're also all on Jamboards. So Jamboards are just like a fun, like virtual whiteboard, essentially. And it's just a really great way of recording all of your thoughts and kind of gathering together and yeah, having that interactive space. So Sarah's just actually put the Jamboard link already in the chat. Yeah, Stephen, did you have a quick question?
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to have to leave at 5 as well. I saw that in the chat from somebody else. But I'm just wondering, as an intergenerational group, does it make sense to have our smaller rooms divided according to age? I'm just wondering about the logic there.
Yeah, so I think the logic there is so that sometimes it's easier to talk about things and talk about problems if you have shared experiences. And so I know that in the past, in certain kinds of intergenerational meetings in the same vein, it's been really helpful for like all youth to be together because it gives a bit more like safety almost in expressing their thoughts and expressing any sort of feelings that they may have. Similar with non-youth as well, you know, it's a bit more of a safe environment to express the more critical side of things rather than just the positives as well. And we will have a time at the end to also kind of come back all together and reflect upon these Jamboards and all of our thoughts. And the Jamboards are also available for everybody so that you can kind of see the thoughts still too. Yeah, Stephen.
Well, I mean, maybe it's my old-fashioned idea, but I think that this is the kind of thing that tends to reinforce the barriers that we have. And somehow communication is key. And if we're going to have intergenerational success in what it is we're trying to achieve, we somehow have to overcome what those barriers are. I mean, I think it's certainly a concern that I would have. And I also think that it's setting up certain barriers in a way, saying, here's what older people are like, here's what younger people are like. I've been around for a while, and there are a lot of younger people who seem to be quite old, and a lot of older people who seem to be quite young in very many different ways. So, I'm just throwing this out here as a something to consider.
Definitely. Thanks, Stephen. That's definitely really helpful. And I think we did definitely consider that. And it's one of those things where if we had all afternoon and we were all in a room together, we would do both. You know, we would have the time to have our siphoned off sections, and then we would have a time to get together and have all like a mix of everybody together and really not have any sort of divides. But unfortunately, we only have an hour and a half, which is far too little time to solve any of these problems, really. These are just to kind of get our stuff started. So I know you someone else just raised their hand, but I'm also eager to get started. If you wanted to maybe message in the chat your question, and then we can get to it that way, just so that we can have as much time as we can to get together and chat in the group. So I think we've just opened up the breakout rooms now.
Yeah, and we will get to questions when we're all back in a group together.
I'm not seeing a invite, but I'm on an iPad. Maybe that's the problem.
Let me click
So
the
we have a setup where you can join the breakout room yourself. So on the control panel, if you go to breakout rooms, you might need to click the more button and hit breakout rooms. You'll actually see a list of breakout rooms that you can join, and you can select join on one that you would like to opt into.
Okay,
I can't see it.
Yeah, I can't either. I see chat, meeting settings, backgrounds and effects, disconnect audio, raise hand, etc. But I'm not seeing a join the meeting option unless it's in the chat. Nope,
Yeah, let's
it's not.
do, if you are having trouble joining a breakout room.
Yeah, put me in one. I
yeah,
identify
put me in
as somewhere between 0 and 100.
So just raise your hand if you can, if you're having trouble, or you can type in the chat.
I'm not seeing
Okay,
a
I think
breakout room either.
I
That's
don't
what I was
see
raising my
anyone
hand
joining the
about.
breakout rooms, so we might have to
Sorry.
we might have to adjust something here.
I think
Okay,
maybe what's
I'm just going
Sorry,
to
go
put
ahead.
people in rooms, so you will be put into a room.
Hello? Yeah.
Thanks for being patient, you all. And the hosts will be kind of in and out of the rooms too. And so if you're needing any further support, we will be kind of hopping around.
I think I'm good. Am I in a breakout room?
Not yet.
Oh. Oh, oh.
Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Oh, I guess it'll happen when it happens. Oh, there's Frank Dodd. Hi, Frank Dodd. Oh God, I don't know if we're in a breakout room or not. I have no idea.
You should be in one, or it should be prompted to go into one.
You mean right now, or are you still going down the list?
Yeah, I put you in. Okay, one moment. Zoom is not cooperating.
Yeah, it's called Mercury in retrograde. Have you heard of that term?
I have, yeah,
Yeah, in astrology, when Mercury goes into retrograde, you get all these technical issues, so they say. So when I have a technical problem, I just say, give me a break. Mercury's in retrograde. Make for a good excuse.
well, thank you for your patience.
Okay, as long as I know it's not
You should be, it's called youth too. I know you're okay.
I guess I'm not the only one with problems. Yeah, Mercury's got to be nicer.
Okay.
Sorry, you can just let us know if there's anything we can do to.
I don't know if you can on your side from.
Yeah. Oh,
Did that do
join.
anything?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you,
Nice.
everyone. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
All right, sorry about that, everyone. Jeez. Didn't
No
realize that'd be
problem.
so weird.
Yeah. No problem. It wasn't actually that long. It just feels like a long time.
Yeah,
when you have
okay.
everyone popping up in the chat.
Thank you.
Can you put me in a breakout room? Or do
Yeah,
you
of
want me
course.
still in this big group?
Yeah. Would you all feel? I'll just put you in some.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I just broadcasted the Jamboard links and the questions again, so hopefully people are finding that.
Is there a way that people see which room they're in? Like, I'm just gonna maybe go around from room to room. A way that people can see what room they're in when they're in it, so that they can like find the right Jamboard.
I think if they were paying attention at the very beginning, they might have, but it might not be showing immediately at the, like as they are now in there. Izzy, Crystal, and Ron, would you like to be placed in a breakout room?
They are in rooms, they just haven't joined. So if you have any
Oh,
issues
gotcha.
joining, let me know.
Yes, could you please place me in a breakout room? I'm not getting the.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay, for sure. I'll try it again. Oh. Yeah, I don't think there were a ton of youth on the call, so
That's okay. Maybe I'll join. I'm gonna join some of the Jamboard groups that haven't, or that don't seem like they've been
okay.
activated yet.
What's one of them that you're seeing that isn't? I could go to one that you're not in.
I was gonna go to the I think that youth 3 doesn't have one, so
Okay,
I'll have there.
cool.
Okay,
I'll be
see you
here.
soon.
Okay.
Okay.
How did that matter?
Seems like people have access to the Jamboards.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, I'm going to start calling people back in about 30 seconds.
Maybe we could leave it a tiny
Or
bit longer.
a bit
just
more.
so that-
Yeah, with everything. Okay.
I mean, there's never going to be enough time, but.
Yeah.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi there. I actually have to leave the meeting, so thanks a lot for setting this all up, and maybe we shall meet again. Okay, take
Yes.
care.
Take
Cheers.
care. Thank you. All right. I'm going to call it.
That's good.
Oh, okay.
Meeting is being recorded.
Hey, Sunny.
Nice to see you all again in the main room. Welcome back. We're just going to be waiting for the next little minute, probably, as people start to return to this main room. I know we didn't have too much time, so sorry if any conversations were cut off, but that's okay. That's the nature of Zoom. That's the nature of time-limited meetings. But I can see already some of these Jamboards filling up, which is really exciting. And we'll share the link to the Jamboards afterwards so that you all can kind of have that reflection after this meeting is done. Okay, it looks like everyone is back now. Wonderful. I'm gonna just. Okay. So thank you all for coming back now. apologies for having a bit of a shorter time in those breakout rooms, but those questions are maybe still swimming in your minds a little bit, and we're hoping to kind of spend the next 5 or so, maybe a little bit more of those minutes to kind of bring up anything that we might have thought about, any sort of eureka moments anyone had been thinking about from the panel, from these questions that we had prompted you to talk about in the breakout rooms. If there's anything notable you wanted to say. Unfortunately, we will be a little bit tight on time because we do want to leave some question time as well for the panelists. So I'm gonna cut any sort of discussion off at 17 past. So 7 minutes we'll have to talk about the questions that we talked about in the jam rooms, the jam boards, and the breakout rooms. So feel free to, if anyone from a group wants to volunteer any sort of thoughts that had been brought up, now's the time, floor is open. And that's okay if you didn't see the questions, if you just have kind of some comments, or even now seeing the questions, we'll put them back in the chat if you have some kind of preliminary thoughts. Ruth, is that a hand?
Yeah, I'd really, because our time is limited, I'd really like to hear from the youth, the younger breakout rooms first, if possible. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. Is there anyone from one of the younger groups wanting to speak on any of the things that they'd spoken about? No pressure either. That's okay. Anyone in the meantime, and feel free if anyone from one of the youth groups want to jump in as well. And just a reminder, yeah, Sarah posted the questions back into the chat. And so we have questions on some different approaches and frameworks that different generations may apply to organizing. We have questions of what builds trust, what makes you have confidence in new spaces with new people, and then also what kind of makes a volunteer position or experience desirable and rewarding. I think we kind of crafted that question to think about maybe specifically youth and how to engage and make things feel rewarding and worth their time, but worth everyone's time. I mean, that's a valid question for everybody. Maya, did I see your hand?
You did, and I guess I'm going to be a bit of a rebel rouser, but I'm going to express my gratitude for bringing everyone together first, because I think this is a really powerful conversation. So our group didn't get a chance to get to slide number 3, but in the conversations during slide number 1 and 2, one of the things that the youth representative in our room, and I'm just going to say youth representative, so if you want to step up yourself, you can, but expressed that she had chosen to take on a career that's filled with direct action because she was directly protesting the extractive nature of unpaid internships. And so I'd really like to sort of maybe venture into that space and how we can work together to make sure that young people who are doing really important work are getting compensated for that work. So they don't do this amazing work over here and then they're forced to go work at a restaurant or a delivery service over there. And so that's what I meant about being a rebel rouser, because I'm seeing some hearts over here. So maybe, maybe can we skip that, because our group didn't get a chance to discuss it. And I would really love to hear from the youth in the room about ideas they might have that we could pitch in to make sure that youth are getting compensated for the work that they're doing.
Madeline has their hand up.
Thank you, Maya. Apologies, I have a cold. Thank you very much for saying that. I think that's massive, right? I don't have any ideas at this moment, but I think Roxy said it earlier, like the amount of labor that are put on the shoulders of youth, specifically in around climate action right now, adds to the amount of anxiety that youth are already feeling about the climate. You know, we know that energy and charisma and creativity and inspiration comes from this age period, and we know that, and we're offering that. But when we're doing this work for free in places and spaces where we need capital in order to survive, it doesn't work. And so a lot of youth aren't engaging in that, even though they want to, because they literally cannot afford to. And then this doesn't even speak to the people who free labor isn't even an option. It's not even on the table. It's so far away from anything that they could imagine doing, because they have to work 3 jobs to pay for that undergrad. So I think compensation for this type of labor is huge. I think we need to respect the incredible work that our elders have done, which was for free, whether that was, you know, campaigns in the 60s, 70s, 80s, for all the amazing things that we live from now, and respect that and honor that, and also not ask for more for us, right? We don't want to be volunteering our time for free on political campaigns. We want to be compensated for that, because we need to be compensated for that. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Thanks, Madeline. Anyone else? We have just another minute left, but maybe that was a short minute. Let's just open up the floor a little bit now for questions for our main panelists again. So you can put your questions in the chat if you want. You can raise your hand. You can just come off of mute now if you'd like. But we're going to spend the last kind of 7 minutes or so as an open question period. Okay, so we've got a question in the chat from Eric. So Eric says, the boomers are the generation most emotionally attached to their cars, whereas younger people often want to live in places where they don't need to own cars. Question for the panel, do you think the climate justice movement can take a strong stand on transportation without alienating older movement members? That's a great question.
I think not demonizing individual lifestyle, like not demonizing individuals' lifestyle choices is really helpful, not just for not alienating older generations, but also just not alienating everyone. We have to recognize that we all have very different abilities to make change in different ways. And so if someone is keeping their car, like that's not what this is necessarily about, at least not for me. It's about structural and societal changes. And so I think another point to that is making sure we're relating to the values of whoever we're talking about. So I think about this a lot in terms of trying to get people on board who are maybe not already climate minded, just finding out what they care about and figuring out how their role in the, like what their role can be in the climate movement. So I definitely think it's possible. Yeah.
I'd just like to add to what Sunny said there. I do think in response to Eric's question that yes, it is possible. And I think it comes from a place of understanding. And if we're listening to each other and understanding what the barriers are for older people, for example. Not everybody can get on their bike and go to work every day. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why people have, you know, sort of restrictions. And I think if we understand each other, then very much so, I think we can do this without alienating older generations. I know Eric works very hard on this issue.
And this is why it's so important to support public transit, because it takes me an hour to get to my fitness class on the bus compared to 10 minutes in my car, right? So it's just, you've got to have good public transit. We've got to really support those campaigns so that people do have a real option to use public transit instead of their cars.
Yeah. Hello? Yeah, I was thinking of doing it from the opposite end. How about the government incentivizes businesses? Because with all this Zooming technology we have, why are people still having to drive to the office? I'd like to know that one, because I think a lot of the corporate work can be done from at home on the computer. And if the government's incentivize it, or, you know, then maybe these corporations won't demand that their people come every day to the opposite, because that's where a lot of the traffic is coming from too.
Yeah.
Tanya.
Oh, no, that's okay. It was an accident. I can't figure out how to take it.
No problem.
Yeah, a tech error.
Roxy, did you have any other thing to say to this?
No, I think there's just a lot of energy, and I think Sunny and Judy said it really well. I'm just going to leave this one and let those with comments emerge.
Perfect. Well, that was a really great question. I think we have time for one or two more questions, depending on the length of them.
What I'd like to ask the youth, what do you see attracting you to the climate change movement? What can we as elders do to support you becoming a climate activist? I really agreed with what the earlier speaker said about, you know, undergraduate students working 3 jobs and not having time to be an activist. Like, being a volunteer is a privilege, to have that time, the luxury of that time. And I don't know, how would you see, as I'm asking because I'm a member of this group, local group called For Our Grandchildren, and we're trying to draw more youth into the climate change work, and trying to figure out different things that would attract them. Thanks.
I mean, maybe I'll share a little bit of a comment, and maybe Sunny will or will not want to share after that. I mean, I don't know if I can speak so much to the attracting new voices. I think there's so many of us that are already activated. Your question made me think about, you know, what does it mean to offer support back to existing youth leaders in youth spaces? And I mean, 2 things that come to mind for me is like immediate, really clear tactics. One is coming not with a, how could I help, but coming with a, hi, this is my name. I have X number of years in this specific skill set. Like, I've done conflict resolution for 20 years with nonprofit organizations, and please add me to your resource list. If something comes up, if anyone needs a mentor or support, you know, I'm the person that you can call. And having really clear calls to action without that kind of expecting young people to tell you what you're supposed to do to be their ally, because like we don't know, we're figuring it out. And the other piece that comes to mind, when even just hearing the word grandmothers, my heart was like, oh. And I reminded of the beautiful words of encouragement that I've received from my elders over time, and even just these like simple messages of like, we're here with you and our hearts are with you, or like, we've gone through the pain and we know it. actually makes a really big difference to young people's morale. And just, I don't know, it just gives like a boost to just come from the heart and share some words of love and encouragement, and like it's going to be okay. And those are two things that come to my mind.
Thank you.
I love what you said at first about like coming not only with what can we do and offering support in specific ways. I think it's really important to learn like from the people you're trying to help how to be an ally, but also I do resonate with it being kind of overwhelming to know exactly what we need. I think I think a lot about how to keep people in the movement. I wish I knew how. I find a lot of the exhausting parts of organizing are trying to get people to care and failing to get people to care. But I think a lot of young people do care. So just making it accessible, making it fun sometimes. Like I've found so much joy in climate organizing, whether it's through artistic endeavors or through the relationships you can build, and just valuing each person for what they bring to the table. Yeah, those are some thoughts.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, Linda,
Oh.
go ahead.
Yeah, I just had an idea darted in my head, like, when the person said, well, I get somewhere 10 minutes by car, and yet it takes me an hour by transit system. Is there a way can anybody think of a way we could have like a flexi transit system? Where maybe, I don't know, you can, like if you book ahead of time, like, and you're going on an off-peak time, that maybe if there's more people who, let's say they're going to the store at that time, is there a way to set up a computer system so the transit system could just have the bus come to your house plus to a couple of few other people's houses, and then they go to the store and back again? Like, I don't know. Is there a way to do a flexi transit system like that?
It's called Uber, and there are also some Uber buses that will do a route and pick up people up.
There's also on-demand transportation that has started to happen in certain cities and a lot of smaller communities as well. So on-demand transit involves often an app or some sort of computer software where you actually punch in your address and then punch in the place that you would like to go, book in a little bit in advance, and then it can take you door to door, and it actually makes the routes much more efficient. Tara, if you want to say something.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I think that, for transit, you have to have an equity lens as well. And it's about affordability. So it should start to become a universal service. Public transit should not be something which we have to pay for. It should be free. It should be a, universal service, or at least subsidized for equity-seeking groups, because there are a lot of people who depend on it for their work. So we have to be, as well as reduce your greenhouse gases, but have an equity lens as well.
Definitely. Thanks so much. I'm just being conscious of time here. So sorry, Eric, I know you just put your hand up, but maybe you can put your comment in the chat, just because I wanted to get some final thoughts out before we all are at the half hour, because in case you all have to leave immediately. But thank you all for coming. Thank you to our panelists for being such incredible speakers on the issues of intergenerational climate organizing. It was really lovely to hear from you all. Thank you to my co-hosts, Sarah and Elizabeth. Both of their organizations do amazing work. And I just wanted to highlight that Elizabeth had shared in the chat, the Future Ground Network had been trying to facilitate some skill matching. And so there's a form there if anyone's interested in kind of going down that route. In terms of next steps and anything that can come out of this meeting, we'll be sure to share the link to the Jamboards, so you can look over those discussions that were made. We'll be sharing a link to this recording as well, and for sure, potential future meetings like this as well. I know that someone said in the chat that there was a real push and desire for more spaces like this, and I think that with the engagement tonight, that's been made really clear, and it's been a really nice space to share with you all. Sarah also posted in the chat that the Climate Justice Organizing Hub is hosting a check-in cross-country check-in with climate organizers of all ages across the country, and has posted the link there as well. So in the communications that we send out after this, we'll also be kind of sharing those links that I've mentioned, so you don't have to memorize all of that. The climate reality project that I'm working with, we're also hosting some meme workshops next week. So if you're interested in learning how to make a meme and want to get involved on the more social media side of whatever group that you're working with, feel free to join that too. I'll put that in the chat, but I also, that'll go out in the comms as well. So yeah, it's a half hour now, so you're free to leave, but thank you all for joining. It was a really nice night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Hope.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Really well organized, and just such a pleasure to spend the time with you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maya.
Hope, I just wanted to say you did a really awesome job holding down the space and moving us along and dealing with the challenge to the proposed plan. I thought you handled that like really eloquently and still got us moving on what we were supposed to be doing here. So thanks for holding us down.
Thanks, no problem.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same. And it's like so funny. We couldn't, maybe I'll just stop recording. It was like just